as the great houses and clans battle one another, war is everywhere. Armies of tanks and men clash beneath skies clouded by scores of aerospace fighters and descending dropships. Combat vehicles hold the lines and cover the advance of infantry, while battle-armored troops dare to oppose battlemechs. Those mighty avatars are walking death and still lord it over our modern battlefields. While battlemechs may rule the set-piece battlefields of the 31st and 32nd centuries, tanks hold the peace and defend it when the fancy Mechwarriors and their machines move on. Over 1,000 years of modern warfare have proved the value of these tracked machines as conveyors of force, and their comparative value guarantees they will continue long into the IlClan era. Besides what holovids and battle reports would suggest, the average civilian living within the inner sphere and periphery would be far more familiar with the side of a battle tank than they would a battlemech. With that in mind, let's get to know one of those tanks a little bit better in hope of answering the question, why do we love the Bulldog? As was all the rage during the build-up in the military readiness of the 27th century, Bulldog Enterprises was looking to capitalize on the demand for new military equipment from the SLDF. Based off of Prosperina within the Draconis Combine, Bulldog Enterprises was a well-established producer of civilian vehicles, so it seemed only natural to look into producing a tracked tank rather than take on additional risk by going with something as complicated as a battlemech. Instead, they envisioned a general-use main battle tank that could be useful in a wide variety of situations and hopefully desired by a wide range of customers. Weighing in at 60 tons, the tank they designed was given the name Bulldog, for reasons lost to history. Maybe someday we'll find out where the designers from Bulldog Enterprises managed to come up with the name. Anyway, I digress. This tracked tank was built around a Bulldog 240 internal combustion engine, which allowed it to roll at up to 64 kilometers per hour. This matched most heavy battlemechs from the time period. Protected by 6.5 tons of standard armor, that is 2 tons less than the max for a 60-ton tank. However, 104 points is enough to cover the Bulldog with at least 20 points on each location. The Xilex 2000 communications and targeting and tracking systems are one of the few elements that come from outside the Bulldog Enterprises production lines. With the goal in mind of producing their tank at the lowest possible cost, Bulldog Enterprises sought to make as many of its parts themselves as possible. This included their own version of the primary weapon, a large laser located in the tank's turret. Along with their own machine gun design, the only outside weaponry that needed to be sourced was a pair of short-range 4 missile launchers. What the Bulldog was left with is a possible reach out to 15 hexes, though most of the time it'll want to be within 9 hexes of its target in order to bring those 2 SRM-4s into play. That's a possible 24 damage in an alpha strike, which is not too shabby for a medium mech. One particularly nasty tactic employed by Bulldog commanders was the swap of standard SRM ammunition with Inferno rounds. During the Hansen Rough Rider raid on Sternward in 3035, a Rough Rider Bulldog armed with Inferno rounds drove up on a dropship which was still in the early stages of unloading Combine reinforcements. The Inferno missiles were fired into the still opening cargo bay of the dropship and caused a conflagration so intense that it killed hundreds and set off the stocks of ammunition inside, destroying the dropship. Unfortunately, the dream of creating an everyman tank that would appeal to every buyer of military equipment didn't really materialize for the Bulldog. Demand was lukewarm in an area of intense competition, so in an act of desperation, Bulldog Enterprises negotiated a licensing agreement in 2700 with the Quixel company located on Ares within the Capellan Confederation. This would produce the Bulldog outside of Combine influence in hope of opening new markets. Critics of the design pointed out that the combination of 8 heat sinks and the large laser is a lot of weight devoted to nominal damage. In all but the longest of campaigns, the Bulldog struggled to justify its existence. Though orders of the Bulldog never approached the numbers of more popular tank designs, they were enough to keep the company going. By the start of the First Succession War, hundreds of thousands of Bulldogs had been produced between Quixel and Bulldog Enterprises production lines, along with massive stocks of spare parts. When House Davion placed a significant order for the Bulldog in the run-up to the First Succession War, they did so largely because the tank was cheap and inexpensive to maintain. This decision ended up being fortuitous and problematic, as the Davion armed forces had plenty of tanks at the outbreak of hostilities, yet could not replace them with new Bulldogs because both production lines were within enemy-held space. They had to exhaust the supply of tanks and replacement parts on hand and forge their own as the succession wars dragged on. Raids on Ares also periodically restocked the Davions with fresh Bulldogs and parts. Throughout the clan invasion, word of Blake Years and Dark Age, the Bulldog filtered out across garrison worlds in both the houses and the periphery realms. There have been a litany of field upgrades, and the tank has benefited from its simple and rugged design. Many off-the-shelf parts could be modified quickly to keep the Bulldog running, which is a valuable trait when supply lines are stretched or wiped out completely. By 2793, one of the most common variants for the Bulldog pulled that large laser from the turret in exchange for a long-range Missile 20 launcher, along with 3 tons of ammunition. This shifted the Bulldog to a fire support role while maintaining the tank's close-range weaponry. This fire support variant is interesting as it was a low-cost way to add LRMs to a force without going all in on an LRM carrier or other fragile vehicle. In a refit seemingly designed to highlight the problems with the AC-2 autocannon, the Bulldog variant with 2 of them showed up around 2812. It does retain the SRMs and machine guns, so it's not completely defenseless. However, those AC-2s are sure something. Of all the Bulldog variants, this is the problem child that only makes sense if your large laser is busted and all you have laying around the bay are AC-2s. It actually highlights one of the major issues with the original Bulldog is that it lacks a primary weapon that can really pack a punch. Way down the timeline in 3088, a fuel cell version of the Bulldog went into service which saw some significant changes. The most notable beyond the weapons loadout changes is the upgrade to 8.5 tons of heavy ferrofibrous armor. This significantly increased the strength of the tank with 32 points of armor protection on the sides, 40 on the front, and 32 on the rear and turret. In the turret, a snub-nosed PPC is your heavy hitter backed up by a pair of Artemis IV augmented MML-5 launchers. Oh, and before you panic, yes, the machine gun is still on the front. Can't have a Bulldog without one, right? With closer diplomatic ties between the Capellan Confederation and the Draconis Combine at the end of the Dark Age and the dawn of the IlClan era, Bulldog Enterprises and Quickcell Co. saw the opportunity to collaborate on an updated version of the Bulldog. Keeping the 240 fuel cell engine and 8.5 tons of heavy ferrofibrous armor, the Bulldog could remain resilient and hard to kill. The original large laser was swapped out for a diverse optics Sunbeam extended range large laser. This of course boosted the tank's ability to reach out and influence others. The 2 SRM-4s were upgraded to Hovertech quad SRM-4s with Artemis IV fire control systems, and of course we're keeping the machine gun but boosting it to a heavy type, because why not? The final result was a more potent and dangerous tank, but time would tell if this would be enough to keep the orders coming in. The critics of the tank continued to point out that the ER large laser just didn't have the punch necessary to make the mech effective, while in practice large numbers of Bulldogs were consistently able to run roughshod over enemy formations. During the Palmyra debacle of 3144, large formations of Bulldogs were thrown into the fray on both sides of the conflict as the Davions sought to make headway against the Combine forces. In one battle, reminiscent of clashes between the Sherman tanks and German Tigers during the Second World War, a squad of Combine tanks rolled up on an AFFS demolisher, which was more than a match for the Bulldogs, which were forced to scatter and engage with it at range. Though the demolisher did end up being destroyed under the combined effort, it really underlined the lack of hard punch from even the updated Bulldog design. Of course, sometimes it can be an advantage to be underestimated. During the Clan Jade Falcon conquest of Lyon, a lone Bulldog serving the Republic of the Sphere had backed itself into an alley during particularly heavy urban fighting. When a Hero Falcon piloted by a Mechwarrior named Rissa spotted it, she all but ignored it, seeking out more dangerous targets. As it turns out, turning your back on a Bulldog can be quite dangerous as the tank's crew fired everything they had at the Clan Battlemech. Rissa learned a valuable lesson as her Hero Falcon's jump jets and partial wing were heavily damaged. Adding injury to insult, the Bulldog lurched forward in a ramming attack which knocked the mech to the ground. The last thing Mechwarrior Rissa saw was the treads from the Bulldog as it rolled over her cockpit. In 3110, the Capellans designed a refit to the recently updated Bulldog that pulled the ER large laser in favor of 2 LB-5Xs with anti-aircraft duties in mind. The Artemis IV fire control systems did have to be downgraded to standard SRMs, and the heavy machine gun was swapped with 2 standard machine gun models. This is an interesting one as the tank could also be used against ground targets as well. It really depends upon how keen you are on those LB-5Xs, which is likely fair to assume not very. it only compounds the tank's lack of heavy-hitting weaponry. 5 years later, another Capellan variant featured a swap of the ER large laser with a plasma rifle along with 2 tons of ammunition. The SRMs are also swapped out for the streak versions of the missile launchers. While I am mildly excited for the plasma rifle variant, I wouldn't want to see mass formations of them. The heat per turn on a target is limited, so that plasma rifle's effectiveness is going to be hindered if you're using that ammunition up on shared targets. The use of streak launchers also means you can't use Inferno rounds, which takes away one of the tank's major selling points in urban combat. I could see tossing a plasma rifle Bulldog into the mix along with the originals or the ER large laser upgrades, but only sparingly. In 3146, the Bulldog received an interesting upgrade at the dawn of the IlClan era. Swapping out the ER large laser for a large chemical laser, tonnage was saved that allowed for a larger engine. The final result was a Bulldog that was a full third faster than the original, at the cost of swapping to an ammo-based laser system. If you're looking for a more mobile force for a limited engagement, this could be the Bulldog for you. Now that the official variants are out of the way, I think we need a Mech Frog refit. The biggest problem with the Bulldog from its inception was that large laser. For our 3152 refit, I see the MF variant, hereby named the Bullfrog, as a Capellan attempt to resolve the issue in as grand a way as possible. Based upon the fuel cell variant, I left the current SRM-4s in standard form along with a single ton of Inferno ammunition in the body. Unfortunately, the machine gun had to go. Sorry, but I did replace it with an inner sphere medium pulse laser in the front of the tank, so maybe that's a nice upgrade. For the main event, the Bullfrog has a Clan Tech LB-20X, thanks to the fine people in Clan Seafox who are willing to sell all sorts of dangerous things if you're willing to write a big enough check. Located in the turret and supplied with 4 tons of ammunition, the Bullfrog packs a nasty punch at close range. If you did swap out the SRM ammo for conventional rounds, that would be a potential 34 damage alpha strike at 6 hexes. Not too shabby for turning around a corner and getting a face full of LB-20X. Now, I think the Bullfrog deserves a little bit more limelight here, so I fired up MegaMech and created a lance of Bulldogs. 2 of the Bullfrog variety and 2 of the original design with a mixed half-and-half Inferno ammunition in standard. Going up against them would be a lance consisting of 3 light mechs and a Wolverine 6K. The original plan was to do some city fighting, but Princess wouldn't march in from the edge of the map after multiple turns, so I was forced to roll out and meet them, and of course all heck broke loose. The LB-20Xs worked quite well, taking down the Hermes 1B early on and getting some good hits on the commando. Unfortunately, both Bullfrogs ended up taking quite a bit of fire. One of them was knocked out early on, and the other ended up being disabled halfway through the match. The remaining 2 Bulldogs just straight up refused to die, taking down the commando while keeping the Wolverine overheated with Inferno rounds. Eventually, the Wolverine fell along with one of the 2 remaining Bulldogs, which left just 1 tank and the damaged Valkyrie to duke it out. A shot to the right torso did significant damage to the Valkyrie, and it just wasn't able to return the favor against the Bulldog. It was a terrific and close fight, but the Bulldogs managed to take the field. Good job, little Bulldog. Overall, I think the Bulldog is an underrated tank. It admittedly suffers a bit in its primary weapons loadout, but it is inexpensive and can be, as I proved in MegaMech today, quite resilient against battlemechs. Some of the later variants can be quite nasty, and I bet that plasma rifle version could cause all sorts of headaches fighting in an urban environment against infantry and battle armor. If you haven't recently given the Bulldog a try, I would recommend doing so. You might find a new appreciation for it. With that, I'll say thank you for coming by today to talk some Battletech. As always, it's been a blast to dig up the info for you, and hopefully it was enjoyable enough to hit that like and subscribe button if you're willing and want to see more. It's mostly painless. Mostly. If you're interested in trying out the Bullfrog, I've included the record sheet for it down below in the video comments. Channel members and Ko-Fi people, you rock. As always, I can't do this without you. Until we meet up again, take care and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.